Good morning, welcome. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. Good morning, good morning. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute, letting folks get in. Good morning and welcome. Thank you for being here this morning. All right, it is 11:01, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Strong Foundations Planning LASO Cycle 3 webinar for LEA leaders. We're excited to be with you today, and if you're interested, this is for the Strong Foundations Planning Grant. If you're interested in the Strong Foundations Implementation Grant, that webinar will be happening at noon today. We'll get started here, and again, this is the LASO Cycle 3 Strong Foundations Planning webinar. All right, a note on generative artificial intelligence before we jump in. TEA's IT security team has asked us to not allow the use of generative AI or AI bots on virtual calls or presentations. So we request that if anyone is using that software, please disable it now. And our meeting host will also remove any AI attendees from the meeting if needed. Our session norms for today, we are in a webinar setup, so we ask that you please use the Q&A function to capture your questions. The team will work to answer questions as possible, but recognizing that a lot might come in, we will definitely record those and be able to use them in future FAQ documents. The FAQ document for this webinar and all LASO webinars will be published on the LASO website on November 13th. Let's just do some quick introductions. My name is Hannah Cox, Director of HQIM Adoption, the team that oversees the Strong Foundations Planning Grant. I'm joined today by Jessica Folk, who is our Program Lead, and Lisa Casas, our Adoption Content Lead, and Linda Audrey, who is our ARBIES Program Lead. Altogether, we support this grant and are available at the Strong Foundations email, which you'll see several times throughout today. Here's the agenda for our time together. We'll do an overview of the LASO Cycle 3 application process and timeline, and then we'll dig into the Strong Foundations Planning deep dive where we explore the why of this grant, and we'll wrap up with next steps. Again, some FYIs before we jump in. Please submit those questions in the Q&A function. The webinar slides and recordings will be posted on the LASO Cycle 3 webinars website when all the webinars are completed. And you can email the laso@tea.texas.gov email with any follow-up questions. So we'll start with an overview of the LASO Cycle 3 application process and timeline. The Strong Foundations Planning Grant is a part of the Learning Acceleration Support Opportunities, or LASO Cycle 3. This LASO is the next iteration of a consolidated grant application that strategically batches funding opportunities that support learning acceleration and innovative opportunities. This coming cycle, we are excited to share that $160 million will be provided in awards for services and support. This combined LASO application supports 11 different initiatives, and it is an ease of application, just one application for an LEA to be able to apply to any or all of these initiatives. There are three main areas in the LASO Consolidated Grant application. The first is curriculum and instruction. This focuses on rigorous, high-quality instructional materials that are designed to make up ground in master grade level TEKS. There's a bucket for more time. This is for students that are in most need, and it can include expanding instructional time in the summer or also focusing on tutoring. And the last section is innovative school models that incorporate all of the learning acceleration framework. Strong Foundations Planning falls under the curriculum and instruction bucket within LASO Cycle 3. And here's a look at the timeline. So as you know, the application opened this Monday. In November, you will be able to have access to all the webinar FAQs. The application closes on December 13th. Then TEA will move into scoring the applications and conducting interviews with LEAs if possible. We hope to be able to announce awards on February 20th. That is a tentative date. And then LEAs will be able to accept and submit budgets and e-grants if they accept the award by 3/24. And then finally, TEA will make sure that NOGAs are shared by May 24th. All right, so now we're going to start to dig into some of the why behind the Strong Foundations Planning Grant. In the case for supporting districts in creating district-wide instructional frameworks in math or literacy to help guide instructional decisions and making progress is really based in the trends that we're seeing in student performance. So right now, only 50% of grades 3 through 8 students in Texas are reading on grade level. You can see in comparison to before and after COVID, and before and after the STAR redesign. Another thing to focus in on is that our math performance in the state of Texas has not yet recovered to pre-COVID levels. We hope that the Strong Foundations Planning Grant is a catalyst for districts that have experienced, some of these realities with their students to be able to guide their instructional decisions moving forward. So Strong Foundations Planning provides support and services in a lot of different ways that can help improve student achievement. The first is through the technical support and high quality professional development that is provided for the leadership team and key district stakeholders that really focuses on research-based best practices in math or literacy instruction. The grant also provides financial and technical support to learn about and from districts who are finding success in gains in student achievement data through their Strong Foundations Planning and Strong Foundations Implementation grant experiences. In this grant, each LEA will also be working with an approved provider to create a researched aligned instructional framework in math or literacy that will be used as a foundation for instructional decisions district-wide. And they'll also have the creation and implementation of a framework rollout plan to support the next steps that are identified through the participation in the Strong Foundations Planning Grant. Our hope is that this support and momentum continues for many years after the initial grant experience. Now we'll move into more of a deep dive of the Strong Foundations Planning Grant. Our ultimate vision is that all students in Texas have access to rigorous grade level content and instruction every day. To achieve this vision, Strong Foundations supports LEAs through the stages of high quality instructional material adoption and implementation. This, of course, starts with the pre-adoption phase and moves into the deeper implementation phase. Strong Foundations Planning really focuses on the very beginning of this journey and helping districts start with a strong foundation. Over the last 3 years, Strong Foundations Planning has supported 279 districts in the creation of an instructional framework in math or literacy. A high percentage of our districts that have participated in this grant have done so twice. They first did a instructional framework in one content and came back and did it in the other content. Our sister program, Strong Foundations Implementation, has supported 221 districts over this span, and altogether we are very excited to share that we've been able to support a total of 352 LEAs across Texas in Strong Foundations. So Strong Foundations Planning is really designed to provide direct grant funds to LEAs for technical assistance to develop an instructional framework in math or literacy that's based on the RBs, or the research-based instructional strategies, This framework is then the foundational piece of document and beliefs that guide key decisions in teaching and learning in that LEA. There are two main pieces of strong foundations planning: the instructional framework development and the instructional framework rollout. So digging a little bit deeper, instructional frameworks really include three main pieces: a clear vision for instruction in that specific content area, a compelling set of belief statements that drive the vision, and concrete action steps that stakeholders can take to realize that vision. And these stakeholders are not limited to, but include students, teachers, leaders, and families. Instructional frameworks are also grounded in research-based instructional strategies, which demonstrate and show how students learn best in a content area, and in the belief that equitable access to rigorous grade-level instruction for all students is the best next step. The next slide really shows some examples of research-based instructional frameworks. We have many more on the Strong Foundations website. You'll be making similar documents that are tailored to your specific LEA's needs. And we encourage you to look at more of the examples if that's something that interests you. So digging a bit deeper into the Strong Foundations Planning Grant, approved providers support LEAs in developing an instructional framework and the rollout. And here are the steps behind that process. It starts with developing a roadmap or a backwards plan. Approved providers work with their LEAs to deeply understand where they're at and what their goals are in order to be able to customize supports and build that into the plan to execute on grant deliverables and professional development. The collective learning or the collective learning series is when the approved provider facilitates to the leadership team and stakeholder committee the research-based instructional strategies, or RBs, in the content area of choice to ensure that all stakeholders are engaged in collective learning and deep understanding of the why. Then it moves into approved providers collaborating with their LEAs to create that vision, identify beliefs, gather input from stakeholders, and ultimately develop the research-based instructional strategies, or RBs aligned instructional framework that's used to guide teaching and learning. After that instructional framework is created, we move into the diagnostic stage. This is where APs support LEAs in conducting a diagnostic of the current state, what is happening right now in the district with teaching and learning. That includes instructional materials. And then the group really compares what that current state is to the vision that they outlined in their instructional framework. After that step, we move into the framework rollout plan. This is where APs and LEAs work together to develop a plan and identify the highest leverage actions to achieve their instructional goals. So whatever that gap was in the diagnostic, the framework rollout plan breaks down the steps to help you close that gap. And often this can include the adoption of high-quality instructional materials. When thinking about the Strong Foundations Planning Grant, it's important to consider a few key commitments. The first is that you will contract with one approved provider of choice for Strong Foundations Planning. A leadership team will be formed that includes representation of key district leaders. This can vary by size and makeup depending on your LEA. There's also the creation of a stakeholder committee, and this should include representation from key stakeholders across the district. Some examples can include board members, district leaders, school leaders, curriculum specialists, instructional coaches, teachers, families and caregivers, and community members. It's also important to consider and make sure that there's representation from general education, special education, and emergent bilingual stakeholders. Then, as we mentioned before, there's the collective learning. This is to ensure that all members of the leadership team and the stakeholder committee complete the research-based instructional strategies training. Another commitment has to do with the creation of the instructional framework. This is where, of course, you're taking that vision identifying key beliefs and action steps, gathering a lot of input from your stakeholders, and ultimately developing that RB's-aligned instructional framework. Another commitment is the creation of the framework rollout plan, which we just covered, taking that diagnostic look and identifying next steps. And then finally, the participation of at least one senior district leader, a superintendent or a chief academic officer or a comparable role needs to be able to attend monthly communities of practice. There are more assurances than these two, and you can find those assurances in the program guidelines for this grant on the LASO website, but there are two that we wanted to make sure that we highlighted in this webinar. The first assurance is that an applicant for this grant acknowledges that the LEA needs to draw down approximately 25% of the grant amount quarterly to remain on track for grant expenditures. The second assurance we wanted to highlight has to do with meeting program-specific assurances. The first is ensuring approval. The superintendent or chief academic officer or equivalent leader needs to approve participation in the program. An approved provider contract and the required funding summary reports must be submitted to TEA. We also require appointing an LEA lead as a primary point of contact for all grant-related activities and the designation of at least one additional point of contact. It is also required to submit all required grant deliverables, the roadmap, instructional framework, and framework rollout plan. And finally, it is an assurance to submit all required data and agreeing to the leadership team and stakeholder team committee into participating in optional, it doesn't happen every cycle, but optional focus groups upon TEA's request. We also wanted to provide this slide to give more of an understanding about the time commitments for this grant. This can vary greatly depending on the size of the leadership team and committee that is constructed within the districts. But in general, for the role of chief academic officer, superintendent, assistant superintendent, 1 hour monthly is required to attend those monthly communities of practice. For any member of the leadership team that engages in meetings with the approved provider and participating in professional development, that can vary anywhere from 4 to 8 hours a month. And then for any member of the stakeholder committee who also engages in meeting and supporting to build an instructional framework as well as the professional development, that can vary anywhere from 1 to 4 hours monthly. Now let's take a look at the funding award amounts for LASO Cycle 3. As you can see, Strong Foundations Planning maps out the awards based on a district's enrollment size. We are anticipating that we'll be able to award between 100 and 200 districts, depending on the interest in the grant and the size of the districts who are applying. Here is the Strong Foundations Planning, Prioritization, and Awarding explanation. So first, LEAs will be awarded in each content area separately based on STAR scores that are sorted lowest to highest in the following priority tiers. The first priority tier is any LEA with a commissioner-appointed board of managers, monitor, conservator for academic performance. Priority tier 2 is for LEAs classified as rural. And priority tier 3 is LEAs who are in the top quartile of economically disadvantaged students in the state. Strong Foundations Planning awardees will work with one approved provider of choice. In the center of this slide, you can see a list of those approved providers for Strong Foundations Planning. This includes all of our ESC regional centers across the state of Texas and the additional external vendors that you see there. On the right side of this slide, you'll see resources that are very helpful as you consider applying for this grant and who you could potentially be working with. The first is the state approved provider list, and that's a document that provides details and contact information for each of these approved providers. There's also a a state-approved provider list webpage. And on that webpage, you will also see if you have any specific questions about the state-approved provider list for Strong Foundations Planning or any of the LASO grants, there is a specific email that you can reach out to. Finally, when you're thinking about approved provider support, you're choosing one of the approved providers from the list, and 50% of the grant funds must go directly to that approved provider that you contract with. The rest of the award, the remaining 50%, is for the LEA to use in two main ways. 20% of the grant funds can be used for additional support from the approved provider of choice, or to support with salaries for individuals directly supporting the grant activities. 30% of those grant funds may be used for other allowable expenses. For example, stipends for stakeholders in the committee group. There is much more detail regarding these buckets of funding in the program guidelines for this grant. Before we finish up this session, we're going to look at a few next steps. The first, as we mentioned earlier, is that the LASO application window opened this Monday, October 14th, and will close on December 13th at 5 p.m. Central Time. This is a hard closing time and date, so please plan on considering and applying to the grant before that deadline. Right now, we are in the program webinar time period, and this spans from October 17th to the 25th. Next steps, if you are interested in the Strong Foundations Planning Grant or other LASO grants, we encourage you to visit the LASO 3 website to familiarize yourself with the grant offerings. We also suggest that you communicate and share this information with your LEA internal teams to support decision-making on which grant may be the best. And then finally, on the LASO Cycle 3 website, you'll be able to register for upcoming informational webinars on this grant and others. Additionally, this year, there are many new resources that are available, including a best fit guidance document that provides criteria that helps an LEA in determining which grants are the best fit. There are grant one-pagers that provide preliminary grant eligibility and key commitments. And there's also eligibility and prioritization guidance doc that provides information to help determine the likelihood of being awarded. For all general LASO-related subjects, you can reach out to the LASO email. Finally, let's take a look here. TEA has emailed unique application links to LEA superintendents. This happened on Monday the 14th. And if needed, those LEAs can complete a request for application link form to receive a new link. This link is how you formally apply for any of the LASO grants. There is a PDF of the application that's posted on the LASO Cycle 3 website if you would like to reference that. However, an LEA must submit the application through Qualtrics using that unique link. And applications must be signed by a superintendent in order to be accepted and considered. Here is some additional information to consider when you're thinking about LASO grants regarding change requests and declines. To accommodate the unique circumstances of T-Class, which was a prior grant system, with emergency relief funding during COVID, change request and decline options were provided to LEAs. Since we are no longer operating under the same circumstance, LASO will be anchored in the informal discretionary competitive grant process, where changes and declines are not advisable. If declines are requested, they are considered on a case-by-case basis for LEAs and could raise the LEA's federal grant risk level in the coming year. If you have any additional questions about this, please don't hesitate to reach out to the LASO team. And then finally, any questions that you have, please drop them, continue to drop them in the Q&A now. We'll stay on for approximately 2 to 3 additional minutes to make sure we have all the questions captured. There will also be office hours for Strong Foundations Planning on November 8th from 8 to 9. During these office hours, there will be technical assistants and program teams there to help provide any support and answer any questions. Again, there is a general FAQ that is posted on the LASO Cycle 3 website, and our updated FAQs from all the questions from these webinars will be posted by November 13th. And again, for any questions about the application process or technical assistance for the application, please reach out to the LASO team at laso@tea.texas.gov. And for any questions about Strong Foundations Planning, please reach out to our team at strongfoundations@tea.texas.gov. We thank you so much for your time. And again, we will stay on for the next 1 to 2 minutes to make sure that all questions are captured. Have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend.